That's my first question. We're going to have Mr. Cutler begin.
That's good. What I didn't tell you was where I was leaving.
Trust me, this is just, they're warming up. University of Southern Maine, it's been in the news. This community, this whole region needs a vital public higher education institution to be as successful as it needs to be. And USM is struggling. And David Flanagan, the interim president, and Joe McDonald, the provost, have offered a transformational plan. It changes USM, and it sets the stage for something called a metropolitan university. What I want to know from each of you is, if you're elected governor, what are you going to do to assist USM in its transition? And if you have time and you're interested, talk about the whole University of Maine system and the challenges facing it. Mr. Cutler, 2 minutes.
Chris, thank you, and thank you for not only bringing the Pirates back to Portland, but thank you for getting all of us here this morning. That was probably tougher. I appreciate it very much. I want to talk about the whole system, but before I do, I want to say, first of all, that I have enormous admiration for David Flanagan and for Joe, and for Jim Page. This is a tough job, because the university system, and in particular the University of Southern Maine, is going through, as we all are in Maine, a difficult and painful transition. The University of Southern, I feel, first of all, badly, as we all do, for the people whose positions are being terminated. I hope that they find satisfactory opportunities in this town, in this city. But we have to make higher education in Maine not only accessible to everyone in the state of Maine, and that means we've got to get rid of the tuition barriers with pay it forward, pay it back. But we also have to contain the costs, because the costs of higher education are rising faster than the cost of health care. I have proposed now for 5 or 6 years that we merge the two systems. We have 7 community college campuses, 7 university campuses, dozens of satellite facilities, and we're a population the size of Greater Buffalo, New York. We've got to do this better, and we've got to do it right. We have 2 CEOs, 2 boards of trustees, we have 2 purchasing departments, 2 of this, 2 of that. We need to do a better job. It's not Noah's Ark. And I think we ought to merge the systems. I know that Paul has put my friend and his friend Sean Moody on both boards. He could keep doing that for 15 more times until we have a merged board, but that's going to take too long. We need to merge these systems, and we need to begin saving money and making higher education, public higher education, accessible to everyone in the state, every kid in the state of Maine, and every person who needs retraining and re-education in the state of Maine. Our workforce is our biggest challenge.
Elliot, thank you very much. Governor LePage, 2 minutes.
Well, I look at it a little bit differently. I think we have a model here in Maine right now that we could look to and the university system should be looking at. Maine Maritime Academy. Best education in America. The best value in America. Best starting wages in America. So I think there's a lot to be learned by the university system. I'm not sure that I agree totally that you merge them, because I think they have different missions, and I don't like to see the missions corrupted. What I do think is the community college system needs to do a much better job at bringing people and bringing the trades. We are losing the trades. They're focused a little bit too much on liberal arts. The university system, I feel the same way as Elliot. It's a shame some people are going to be losing some jobs. But the university system needs to reinvent itself. Now, I'll give you an example where I think one campus is doing a marvelous job. University of Maine Fort Kent, that little school way up there in the north. They've been working with the high schools. And we've had what I've been calling the bridge year, that 5th year. Well, they've done it. In 2011, they got 24 students, 11th graders, put them into the university system. They finished the 11th grade, 12th grade. One student finished a year and a half of college, no tuition. 17 finished the first year of college, no tuition. 6 completed high school and at least a semester of college. That's the model I think is going to be working better. It's not just the university. It's K through 20. The whole system needs to be working closer together, and we can get it done here.
Governor, thank you very much. Congressman Michaud, 2 minutes.
Yep. First of all, I want to thank you, Chris, and the Chamber for having this debate this morning. Really glad to be here this morning. I think what this region needs is a strong public university system. And it's time that the University of Southern Maine takes its rightful place in the system as well. What has happened is a perfect storm here for USM and higher education. State support has been stagnant, the cost has been going up, and in the university, the enrollment actually is going down. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? I think what we have to do about it is bring people together, the faculty, administration, students, and the community here in the Portland region to really focus on that long-term strategy of what we're going to do here in this part of the state with the higher education. And part of that has to look at jobs and economic development to make sure that higher ed is focused on making sure we have the trained workforce that we need. The fact of the matter is, with the enrollment going down, that has caused a big problem. And under my Maine Made plan, what I decided to do is actually have the sophomore year tuition free. And the reason why the sophomore year tuition free is that is the year that students actually drop out of college because they can't afford it. And by making that available, study after study has shown that they actually will stay into college as well. Education, as I've always said, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, education is an investment in our future. The greater Portland area is the economic engine of this state. And if we're going to keep that economic engine going, we got to partner up with higher ed to keep this part of the state going, which will help all of the state of Maine. So thank you.
Congressman, thank you much, and thank you all for your responses. Going to move on to our next question. Governor LePage is going to address it first. So last week in the newspaper, we saw that Verso closed its Bucksport mill. It's been a bad year for paper mills in Maine. At the same time, we see an awful lot of exciting innovation in the manufacturing sector here in this region and across the state, from robotics to life sciences, all sorts of innovations happening. What I'd like each of you to discuss is the transitions that are going on in Maine manufacturing right now, what you can do to help those companies that are in trouble, but also with an eye toward growing our manufacturing sector into the 21st century. Governor LePage.
Well, there are 3 things we have to do to grow the manufacturing sector, and it is growing. In fact, Friday morning, where my opponents are going to be at another one of these forums, I'm going to be doing a groundbreaking up in Washington County, because they're building 2 new tissue machines. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but here again, the paper industry. The paper industry is going through a major, major transformation, and it's happening because this started about 20 years ago. The regulatory environment in Maine was so bad that the Tier 1 companies stopped investing in their mills, into the technology. The last real technology in Maine was at SAPI in the 80s, early 90s, and now we're having a new investment in Washington County. The reason they're investing is they got natural gas. I think we need in Maine to lower the cost of doing business. We have to be more customer service oriented towards our manufacturing companies. And we have to recognize that investment capital goes where it's welcomed and stays where it's appreciated. We've not done that. Just in the last 4 years, we're starting to do that. And in the next few months, you're going to see some major manufacturing coming to Maine. But going back to the paper industry, they've not invested in technology. We need to invest in some technology. I heard recently that one of my opponents wants to buy the power plant. Well, that the state should buy it. well, we'd have to stand in line, because there's about 5 people bidding for it right now, and we'll know on Friday who's going to buy it. But that's not where the problem is. That's the caveat. That's the good part. The problem is 570 people are going to lose their jobs, and those are the people we got to re-energize and make sure that they get a job if they can't stay in Bucksport. I'm still not convinced it's going to close. If we would have the natural gas, the capacity here, they'd be fine. My other opponent just recently voted a second time to delay natural gas to Maine.
Governor, thank you. That's your time. I'm going to move on to Congressman Michaud.
Thank you very much. Having come from the manufacturing sector, I know how important it is for the state of Maine. And yes, the paper industry has changed over time, but it's still a viable part of our economy. For every paper maker job, it relates to about 5 to 7 other jobs here in the state of Maine. What we need here in the state of Maine, I think some elected officials really don't understand, not only the industry competing with other companies, they're competing within the same corporation for those capital dollars here in the state of Maine. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at stability, both budgetary stability at state level because of what's happened over the last few years with cost shifting back on the municipality, that affects the bottom line for businesses. Versal Paper Company, they actually invested millions of dollars in the plant up in Bucksport. And they did it based upon the better program being X. That program changed. We can't change the rules in the middle of the game that has happened for a number of different projects here in the state of Maine under this administration. Trade is a big issue. When you look at trade, we got to make sure our trade deals are fair trade deals. And the fact that the Canadian government actually helped subsidize the Nova Scotia mill in Brunswick to the tune of almost $200 million, they can sell their paper in the United States for $50 a ton cheaper. Trade is an issue. Wood fiber is an issue, is a cost to the industry that we have to focus on. The governor mentioned energy. Energy is a component, but what the governor fails to mention is the fact that if we're going to expand that pipeline from the bottleneck in Massachusetts, we got to work collaboratively and cooperatively with the other governors in New England, and that means we got to participate in that process. And the governor has failed to participate in that process when they had a 2-day energy conference. 5 of the New England governors were there, but Governor LePage sent a staff person there versus going there himself to talk about how important the energy is here for the state of Maine.
Congressman, thank you. That's your time. I'm sure the governor will have something to say about that. But Mr. Cutler, it's your turn right now. So hopefully we can hear from you for 2 minutes.
Yeah, Mike, let me get this straight. Years ago, you pushed legislation to split off from the Great Northern mills the energy generation in the hydro dams, making those mills less economically viable. You blame NAFTA for the problems we're having, but you had the father of NAFTA up here campaigning for you. You, as we all are, in favor of increased natural gas capacity in Maine, but the guy who's standing in the way, Deval Patrick, was up here campaigning for you too. I mean, come on. Look, here's the problem, folks. We are going through a real transition in Maine. We're moving into the 21st century. The president of Verso told me on the phone the other day, the real problem here is that paper demand around the world is falling at between 5 to 7% every single year. It's hard to keep going under those circumstances. And what I would ask you, Governor, please, take care of the workers. You've said you're doing that. I take you at your word. I hope you use all of your discretionary funds for them to get them heating well this winter. In Millinocket, in Old Town, in Bucksport. Secondly, please don't do another Kate Street deal in Bucksport. And third, please don't split off the power assets, the power generating assets from the mill. If someone will come in and operate the mill, then let them use the generating assets, let them buy both. But if no one wants to operate the mill, don't let them buy that plant and put the energy onto the grid and not use the steam and the heat that comes out of that plant, 33 million gallons of oil equivalent a year. 4-cent power could be available in Bucksport, and if we want to put 500 people back to work, that's the way to do it, because that will make Bucksport a fabulous opportunity for manufacturing in the state of Maine.
Mr. Cutler, thank you very much. I have to move on to our next question, but as I've reminded the audience, if we want to revisit these issues in your time allotments, you're certainly welcome to do so. I want to turn to K through 12 education, which I think we all can agree is one of the foundations to our economy. Proficiency-based education, the Common Core, and the current changes in K-12 education are subject to review by Commissioner Ryer and the subject of debate, not just here in Maine, but across the country. I'd like to get your views each on our current K-12 education policies, and we're going to begin with Congressman Michaud.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, education is an investment in our future. And if we're going to move forward as a state, we got to make sure we provide that education there. K through 12 is crucial. Pre-K actually is crucial. Study after study have shown the more money you can invest up front, the better results you'll get at the end. And as governor, I'm moving forward with an aggressive plan to fund pre-K, have pilot programs. It's not only state dollars, but I've also talked to philanthropies from around the country to see whether or not they'll partner with the state to have these partnerships so we can get more aggressive pre-K funding here in the state. Education, the voters approved getting to the 55%. However, the legislature has never met that 55%. Because of the budget instability that has occurred with self-induced and deficits, there has been a cost shifting back to the municipality. And as governor, I'm going to try to get to the 55%. It's not going to happen overnight. I realize it's not going to happen overnight, but we got to make an effort to try to get to 55%. But we also have to look at other areas that affect education in municipalities. And when the governor did those huge tax cuts, the bulk of them went into effect outside the budget cycle. And the reason why they went into effect outside the budget cycle is so he wouldn't have to pay for them. And when he submitted that, the following budget, because of the self-induced deficit, what he did was, in his proposed budget, was eliminated municipal revenue sharing, shifted the cost, the unfunded liability back onto municipalities. And that's just wrong. Over the years working in the legislature, we've always had that partnership with municipalities. And I know it's difficult, particularly in downturn in the economy. But we got to work with municipalities. We got to work with the school system here in the state of Maine to make sure that we work collaboratively. And under what we've seen over the last 3.5 years, that collaboration, working together, really hasn't came to fruition.
Congressman, thank you very much. You stopped right there on your time mark. I appreciate that. And Mr. Cutler, you're up next.
Thank you. Mike, I agree with you. We've got to reach 55% state funding for public education. And we've got to reverse the trend on municipal revenue sharing. Doing those two things is going to cost almost $300 million. The difference between you and me is I've figured out how to pay for it and you haven't. The property tax relief plan that I've put forward will cut property taxes around the state of Maine for median homeowners by 20 to 40%. We're going to substitute one of two sales tax adjustments. One is a 0.5% increase, 5.5% to 6%. Alternatively, if we don't want to do that and we want to export more of our tax burden to the 15 million people who visit us every year, we can have a seasonal sales tax from 7% from May to October, except for autos and building materials, and go back to 5% the rest of the year. That's going to raise $185 million. $100 million of that can go back into towns and cities. And $75 million of it is going to go into public education, and that's going to get us really close to the 55%. It's going to go into early childhood education. Mike hasn't figured out how to pay for that yet. It's going to go into extra help for communities that need it, because I don't think that public education and equal opportunity ought to be a function of someone's zip code or their parents' affluence. And third, it's going to go into paying good teachers more. It's going to go into highly effective educator training, professionalism. And $10 million is going to go into doubling the amount of money we spend on promoting tourism in the state and developing a brand for the state of Maine, because this is our biggest industry. A governor and anyone running for governor has a responsibility, not only to figure out what he wants to do, but to demonstrate the leadership that says how he is going to do it.
Mr. Cutler, thank you. I can see the governor's anxious to respond to this question as well.
Well, I just need to say this. If the Maine people would just take the opposite of what you just heard from these two opponents, you would be close to the truth. Give you an example. Mr. Michaud says I did an off-budget tax decrease. Mike, in 2011, my budget was the tax decrease. And the vote was 120 to 26 in the House, 29 to 6 in the Senate. That's very bipartisan. That's a fact. Please check it out. If you'd like, I can have my assistants help you. Secondly, revenue sharing. Revenue sharing is very simply a code for we don't want to work with our neighbors. Now listen to this. We have 50 states. The 50 states are laboratories, and that was designed purposely so you take the best from each state. What is happening to states that are using a stronger county government and collaborate more in areas like public safety, roads? You see their costs way down. I was Mayor of Waterville. Take Waterville, Winslow, Oakland, Fairfield. You got a city manager, you got a superintendent, public works, police chief, fire chief, tax assessor, 6 people. Now I compare that times 4, that's 24 people. I go to Lewiston, and they have a population of 36,000. Those 4 towns I just mentioned, Waterville, Winslow, Oakland, and Fairfield, have about 36,000 people. They use 24 people to do what they're doing in Lewiston with 6. And Lewiston is already talking to Auburn to collaborate even further. So the issue is here that local control is a mainstay in Maine, and everybody loves it. But local control is expensive. So we can keep it, and that's fine. I'm all for it. I'm all for having everything under local control, but the state of Maine should not be tapped to pay for it.
Governor, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our 4th question, starting with Mr. Cutler. Last December, Commissioner Mayhew, Health and Human Service Commissioner, stood on this stage and discussed the state's inability to fund the expansion of MaineCare, the federal Medicaid program here in the state. She did not discuss the costs for people who are sick or paid health insurance or our health care providers. Gridlock is a very difficult issue at the State House, and this issue may be the poster child for gridlock. I'd like to hear each of you share with us your views on MaineCare expansion, but most particularly in the context of how to get beyond the gridlock and find a solution that works for Maine. 2 minutes, Mr. Cutler.
Thank you, sir. We got to take the Medicaid money. I think one of the worst decisions that my friend Governor LePage made was not to do it. We paid off the hospitals, yes. But today, just about every hospital in the state of Maine is either back in the red or on the way to going back into the red. Why? Because they're taking care of people for whom they're not getting reimbursement. We don't have universal access in Maine to primary and secondary preventive care. The hospitals are taking it in the chin. And we don't have another liquor business to sell. So now what? So we got to take the Medicaid money. We ought to do it on day one. Secondly, Maine is one of the few states that doesn't have a health care system plan. We're about to have, in my view, 2 health care systems in the state of Maine. 2. That's a challenge, but it's an opportunity as well. we've got to know what we're doing, and we've got to have some public involvement in what happens in healthcare in Maine. I think that we have a moral responsibility to make sure that everybody has access to healthcare, and I think that we have a financial responsibility to ourselves to do it, because it's costing us way more to not do it. When we do extend universal access to health care, then we better do it right. We'd better make sure that we do it with Maine values. We'd better make sure that the incentives are running in the right direction, that we're paying for performance and outcomes and not for procedures. We need to reward high-quality care. We need to integrate mental health care. We need to do it right. Now, there are some good things happening in Maine in healthcare, but we're still the 5th most expensive state in the country for healthcare on a per capita basis. We cannot afford that.
Mr. Cutler, thank you very much. Governor LePage.
I absolutely agree. That's the first true thing I've heard this morning, is that we're the 5th highest cost. Medicaid expansion was done in 2002. We had 110,000 people in the state of Maine uninsured. We spent over $1 billion on Medicaid expansion from 2003 until 2013, when we paid them off. We paid off the hospitals at $750 million, but that's only part of the cost. The other cost that we incurred in that period of time is we ignored the elderly, we ignored the disabled, and we ignored the mentally ill. We have a plan that this year, for the first time in a decade, we are going to be able to budget to give a reimbursement to nursing homes, which the last reimbursement I did, because Congressman Michel's party did not want to give the nursing homes an increase. We did it this summer because we had a little money left over in the budget, and we spent it on the nursing homes. They had the money, we found the money, we asked the Democrats to give it this year because we had lost 2 in July, we were going to lose 2 more in August. They refused to. So I just did it. Now, I'm going to ask the people of Maine to vindicate me in November.
Governor, thank
Now,
you. You're not done.
I'm not quite done.
That's all right. It was a long pause. I thought you were done. I'm sorry.
When we ended, and Mr. Cutler, Mr. Michel will tell you, we got to take the money day one because it's free money. Folks, we have a letter from the federal government that says there's a small class of people that qualify for the exemption. Childless adults, about 20,000 people. The other 90,000 people qualify for regular Medicaid, and they're on regular Medicaid. All we got to do is put the money up, and we haven't been willing to do it. Now, I'm going to show you a map. It's a map of Maine. Many of you can't see it, but every dot on this map, and I have one for my 2 opponents so they can get up to speed. This map is every little dot here is an FQHC or an RHC, which by federal law are required to provide primary care to Mainers with a 100% discount.
Governor, we're running over time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. There's a lot to say on this. Congressman, your 2 minutes.
There you go.
Thank you very much. I support expanding the access under the Affordable Care Act for the 70,000 Mainers who were denied that access because this governor's vetoed that bipartisan bill that was put together not once but 5 times. The bottom line is, not only is that the morally right thing to do, but actually Maine will save over $600 million over a 10-year time frame by covering those 70,000 Mainers. Hospitals will receive additional $348 million over that same time frame by covering those 70,000 Mainers. It's estimated that it will create about 3,000 jobs as well. Also, the estimation is over a 10-year time frame, the state will bring in about $3 billion. Now, the fact that small businesses Some of you are paying health care for your employees. Without expanding access under the Affordable Care Act, what's happening is there is cost shifting. Going to the hospital, you're paying up some of the additional costs because hospitals are the uncompensated care because the governor has refused to expand access under the Affordable Care Act. The governor talks about paying back the hospitals. He actually, as Mr. Cutler mentioned, he used a credit card actually to pay back the hospitals with the liquor funding. But what the governor doesn't talk about is by vetoing that bill, not once but 5 times, he's actually putting a debt onto the hospitals. I met with the Maine Hospital Association a couple of weeks ago. They estimate it's going to be anywhere from $75 million a year to $100 million a year. He's given it in one way, taking it back in the other way. The other issue, when you look at healthcare is a complex issue. The governor has no plan to look at the holistic problem of healthcare. Under my May plan, I worked with a lot of healthcare providers here in the state of Maine, throughout the whole state of Maine, rural and urban. We actually put forward a comprehensive 10-point plan on how we're going to deal with the healthcare issue here in the state of Maine. And it requires collaboration, working together. And I feel very confident that once you have a chance to look at that plan, because it will be helpful for small businesses, and I encourage you to do so. I'm very optimistic about it and what it will do to help hold down the cost of health care here in the state of Maine.
Congressman, thank you very much. Our next question changes pace again a little bit. We're going to start with Governor LePage on this one. Now, last month, the mayor of the city of Portland, Michael Brennan, proposed a municipal ordinance to raise the minimum wage within the city to $10.68 over 3 years and then put it on a cost of living adjustment basis. My question for each of the candidates is, number one, do you support or oppose municipal action on the minimum wage? And number two, what is your position at the state level? Do you support a statewide minimum wage increase? And if so, how much? Governor LePage, you get to start.
Okay, first of all, Portland should read the Maine Constitution, and they can't do what they're thinking they're going to do, so that's fine. I've already checked it. And just like South Portland, it was unconstitutional, the referendum that they got beat on the tanks. They need to read the Constitution. Secondly, I gotta, before I go on, I gotta correct Mr. Michaud. He said he read the ACA. He said he read it cover to cover. But twice you said in public statements that states are required to have a state exchange. It's not true. You just said that we qualify for the Medicaid expansion. I have a letter from CMS. We will send you a copy. It says you do not qualify for 100%. You qualify for 60-40, or roughly 60-40, the current reimbursement rates. Folks, don't believe a word about this 100%. It's only for 20,000 people. Now, as far as I believe that if the country goes with a minimum wage, we would be right behind them. I think going at it alone is going to do what happened the last 40 years. Going to make us an outlier. It's going to make us non-competitive with the rest of the country. We need to fight to be competitive, not only with the other 49 states, but on a world market. I am so tired of hearing minimum wage. How about optimum wage? How about living wages? How about $25 an hour jobs, $40 an hour job, $50 an hour job? That's the jobs I'm going after. Minimum wage, I'll leave that up to my opponents.
Governor, thank you. We're going to hear from one of them right now, Congressman Michaud.
I believe that if a person's working full-time, they shouldn't be living in poverty. And I do support increasing the minimum wage. Not only is that the right thing to do, but if you look at what happened earlier this year, 13 states actually have raised the minimum wage, and they've seen a faster growth than other states who have not raised it, like the state of Maine, because the governor vetoed the bill. If you look at when employees have more money to spend, they will spend it in businesses if you're on minimum wage. Last month, I went door to door in Lewiston. I ran into this elderly lady. She's 80-some-odd years old. She told me she went to work when she was 16 years old. And back then, she told me that there were those that were rich and those that were poor. There were no middle class. Then the middle class came about. What she also told me was now she's seeing it going the other way, that we're just going to have the wealthy and the poor. She explained to me that her son, who's 61 years old, was unemployed for 3 years. He finally got a job working at a grocery store at minimum wage, $7.50 an hour. She said he can't live on that. She said we have to raise the minimum wage. And ironically, she said we have to raise it to $9 an hour. And she's right. We do have to raise it $9 an hour. And as governor, it's my goal to raise it $9 an hour over a 3-year time frame. I'll work with the business community to see how we can actually fold that in, working with the business community. Having said that, it's definitely would be best if the federal government would actually increase the minimum wage. They have not, and they will not with the current makeup of Congress. I think the state should increase the minimum wage. I don't blame Portland for doing what they want to do. We can't have that piecemeal approach. So as governor, I'll be proposing raising the minimum wage to $9 an hour over a 3-year time frame, but I want to work with the business community to see how we can do that, similar to what I did when I was president of the Maine Senate. With the evenly divided Senate, we raised the minimum wage not once, but a 2-tiered system. Unanimously, Republicans and Democrats, and the independent governor, Angus King, signed the bill into law.
Congressman, thank you very much. Mr. Cutler.
In 1968, which is when I graduated from college, the minimum, sorry?
You that old?
Sorry.
Give him an
It's all right, Paul. Yeah, give me 10 seconds.
Don't worry about it.
In 1968, when I graduated from college, the minimum wage in today's dollars was $10.95. If the minimum wage had kept pace since the last time it was raised nationally with the incomes of the top 1% of Americans, the minimum wage today would be over $22 an hour. Today, it takes an hour of work at the minimum wage to buy 2 18-ounce boxes of Cheerios. It's not right. And even raising it to $9 or $10 an hour is probably not a livable wage. I think the federal government ought to do it, and I think the governor of the state of Maine, whoever he is, in the next session of Congress ought to be all over Congress like white on rice to get it done. We need a level playing field. Now, it's not enough. It is not enough. We're in a, as I said earlier, we're in a transition in Maine to a 21st century economy. We need to have research jobs in Maine. We need to have the kinds of jobs that Kepware has here in Portland. We need the kinds of jobs that do pay not only $20 or $30 or $40 an hour, but jobs that pay even more than that. We need to raise the ceiling in Maine because right now, incomes in Maine are 40% behind the rest of New England. That needs to be fixed.
Mr. Cutler, thank you very much.
Right on. 10 seconds.
Did I do it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Want to make sure we're keeping it all fair here. That's good. Congressman Michaud is going to start off with our 6th and final question. I want to talk a little bit, I want to get you guys to talk a little bit about demographics. USM's Professor Charles Coughlin has recently written that, quote, Maine's working age population peaked around 1990. It has been steadily declining ever since. For the next 20 years, Maine will be a labor-short economy. That means there will not be enough people to fill the jobs available. Now, governors struggle to impact short-term economic activities, but you have a lot of power to influence long-term trends. I'd like to hear what each of you is thinking about doing to influence Maine's current demographic trends. Congressman.
Thank you very much, and that's a very good question. When you look at Maine's population, we have the oldest population in the country per capita, but we also have the youngest population per capita in the country as far as our farmers. So we got to get folks here moving in the state of Maine. Under my May plan, I really focus on the stability and predictability and how we're going to grow the economy here in the state of Maine. And under my May plan, I'm talking about small businesses. 97% of the businesses here in the state of Maine are small businesses. And if we were able to grow just at the national average, that's 31,000 jobs here in the state of Maine. And there's ways we can do that here to grow at the national average. Under my plan, I'm proposing a Maine Domestic Trade Center, similar to what I did when I was in the Maine legislature working with Governor King with the International Trade Center to really help businesses export their markets, find markets for their products. That's how we're going to grow part of the economy here in the state of Maine, is focusing on small businesses. Elderly population, actually that's a plus when you look at here in the state of Maine. When I've visited the Startup Week down here in Portland, and I saw a lot of these young entrepreneurs and the work that they were doing, there's a great opportunity to tap into our senior citizens population, because I know, having talked to them, that they want to spend some time with a young entrepreneur to move this state forward. And when you look at dementia and Alzheimer's, here's an opportunity where we can do more research and development and really help have people stay and live in place here in the state of Maine. We can take advantage of our elderly population in the state of Maine, but we got to find other areas where we can grow the economy. Small businesses is one area, and making Maine the food basket for New England is another area where we can actually help move the state forward in a very positive direction. And it's going to take a lot of heavy lifting. And I'm the only candidate in this race for governor up on stage that actually has a proven track record of being able to work across the aisle to get things done. I did it when we had the 17-17-1 split in Maine Senate. I carried that philosophy in Congress as I worked on the Veterans Affairs Committee and Transportation Committee to work on these complex issues to really get them highlighted and find solutions to the problems that we have here in the state of Maine.
Congressman, thank you. Mr. Cutler.
Thank you, Chris. Mike, you've worked across a lot of aisles. That I acknowledge. But you've never created a job, ever. And you've never managed a business, ever. When I've gone around the state of Maine and met with owners, managers, operators of businesses, large and small, and I ask them, what do you need to grow? They talk about energy costs because it is an issue. They talk about taxes because it is an issue. But the one issue every single one talks about is the fact that we don't have a younger, healthier, skilled, trained, and educated workforce. We've got to make sure our kids go on from secondary school to some kind of post-secondary training and education. We graduate about 85% of our kids from high school. That's good. And all you guys here from all of those high schools, I'm not going to try to listen because I'll lose my time. Thank you for coming. Graduate. Please go on. And if I'm governor, money will not stand in your way. You're not going to get a 25% discount because we'll have pay it forward, pay it back in place. But we've got to get our kids going on. Why? Because we're only 34th in the country in the number of our graduating seniors who go on to any kind of post-education, post-secondary training or education. That's got to change. We need to get young people to come to Maine, and I'll give them a tax credit against their Maine income tax liability for every dollar they pay off their student debt if they'll come to Maine. We've got to recruit scientists like Vut Yin at the Mount Desert Biological Lab, who's working on regenerating human cells. And why is he here? He's here because he wants to live here, and because there are research institutions in the state that will give him a home, and we can bring in more Vut Yins. And when we do, they're going to spin off businesses, and we're going to grow. But let's pay attention to our competitive advantages, and one of the biggest is that everybody would like to live here if they can get a job.
Mr. Cutler, thank you. Governor LePage.
Thank you. Well, I hate to keep correcting, but Mike, we don't have the youngest farmers. The average age of farmer in Maine is 59. Sorry. and that came from your government in Washington, federal government. Elliot is absolutely correct. And I will say this as well. My staff, which is a very young staff, is really contributing to the future of the median age of the state of Maine. This year, I think 8 kids have been born on my staff. We only have 19 people. I mean, one young lady gave twins. She's really working overtime. And she's a brilliant attorney, by the way. The point is, we're already working on some programs, and I think Elliot's partially correct. I think the tax credit is okay, but Texas Instrument, for instance, here in Portland, South Portland, I spoke to the CEO, and he says, you know, Governor, you got to help me. My biggest challenge is getting my middle managers, the ones to take a promotion in Maine because of your tax structure. They look at it as an 8% cut in pay. This is what we need to do. And Elliot's absolutely right with the schools. We have to do a better job educating our kids. One thing he failed to mention is in Maine, while we graduate 85%, 52% that go on to higher education need to take remedial work. They lose a year. We need to do a better job K through 12. We need to do a better job in the STEM environment because those are the jobs of the future. We're working on 2 programs right now. One is a scholarship-based system for kids that go into the STEM world, into the jobs of the 20th century. I spoke to an engineer last night who runs an engineering company. He says, I need 8 engineers. I got to bring them in. I can't find them here. So we got to grow our own. We can't find primary care physicians. Let's grow our own. So that's what we need to do. And in addition to that, we can attract people by developing a system of selling student loans to employers and give them the tax credit so we can then bring people from other states into Maine.
Governor,
And that we're already working on.
thank you very much, and I apologize again for our time being so short.
I get carried away, sorry. I love it so much.
It gets them going. You know, I hope everybody in the audience appreciates how difficult it is for these gentlemen who did not have the questions before they stood up here to speak to these difficult issues in very short periods of time. I think they've done a wonderful job. I wish you'd all give them a round of applause. We're now going to go to our closing statements. They are 3 minutes each, and we are going to start with Mr. Cutler.
Thank you again, Chris. Thank you, Chamber members, for hosting this. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And thank you all for coming. We need a vision and a plan and a strategy for the 21st century. Prosperity in Maine isn't going to be a coincidence, and it's not going to be an accident. We have to plan it, and we have to make it happen. We're 1,300,000 people in this state. We cannot afford any more Old Towns. We can't afford any more Millinockets. We can't afford any more Bucksports. We have got to realize together that we are in a transition. It's going to be painful, but it's going to be full of opportunity. And we need to manage it well. And the job of the next governor is the biggest, most complicated job in the state of Maine. And it's going to be the biggest and most complicated job, I submit to you, that any governor of Maine has ever faced. On January 5th, one of us is going to be sworn in as Maine's next governor. It's going to be a cold day. There's probably going to be snow on the ground. And while some of us will be in Augusta busy with the inauguration, neighbors and friends of ours around the state are going to be trying to decide whether to buy heating oil or medicine or food. 3 weeks before Christmas, 500 workers in Bucksport, unless something changes, will have just joined 600 other paper workers who lost their jobs in 2014. Some of our best and brightest students, our brightest hopes, will be anguishing over whether they have enough money to go back to school, maybe for their senior year or their junior year, or to go at all in their freshman year. A new chapter for Maine is going to begin that day. It can be the second chapter of the same embarrassing, frustrating, gridlock story that we've lived through now for 4 years, or it can be a rewrite of the 8-year story that came before, the one that triggered a year after year continuous 11-year slide in Maine's economic activity compared with the rest of New England. Or we can close the book on policies that don't work, free ourselves from partisanship and special interest politics, roll up our sleeves, and begin writing a new story where Maine will lead the nation in ideas, in innovation, and in success. Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever you do, I want to be your partner in writing this new chapter for Maine. If you love Maine as I do, I ask for your vote. A vote that means we have the courage and the independence to say that it doesn't have to be this way anymore. A vote to create opportunities for our kids and our grandkids so they can live in Maine. And a vote that says you believe, as I do, that there is nothing wrong with the state of Maine that men and women of goodwill can't fix. That nothing, absolutely nothing, can hold us back if we work together and if we believe in ourselves again. And together, we can create from these incredible assets in this state a state full of opportunity for every man, woman, and child who is lucky enough to live here. Thank you again for coming today.
Mr. Cutler, thank you very much. Governor LePage, your closing statement.
4 minutes. I'm keeping time on it. That was almost 4 minutes. You know, liberals, and I mean liberals, because I make a clear distinction between a Democrat and a liberal. And in Augusta, we have a lot of good Democrats, but we don't have leadership from the Democratic Party. We have liberals that are leading. They talk and talk and talk, and that's all I've heard for 4 years, is talk. I'm not the best and the most polished politician. In fact, I hate the word politician. I prefer the term businessman, because that's what I've done my whole career. And I believe my actions speak for themselves. I think, despite what you hear from my opponents, there are some good things happening in Maine. Really good things happening. I met a young man last week. About 3 weeks ago, we were opening up one of our offices. He came up to me, and he was saying, "You took my Medicaid away, and you took my food stamps away." And I said, "No, whoa, I don't take your food stamps till October 1st. So I asked him, "Are you working?" "No." "Do you want to work?" "Yes." I said, "You take this card, you call me tomorrow morning, and we'll get you a job." Last Friday, he sent me an email. "Thank you, Governor LePage, for helping me find a job." You know, it's about the future of Maine. And if you haven't, you know, you hear a lot of, you see all these ads. The governor is an embarrassment. He does this, he does this, he said this, he said that. You know, so I studied him last night. Guess what? Not one of those things I said in the last 2 years. It was always said in the first 2 years. So even a Frenchman can be taught to cool down. I've reduced taxes. We're reforming welfare because I believe that money doesn't solve poverty. Education does. You throw education at it, and you can, I'm proof positive that if you give me an education, I can get out of the streets. And I did. Now, I'm not as polished as my opponents, but I'm a businessman, not a politician. We've helped Mainers create 22,000 jobs, and that we're just starting. If I'd have had some help with a few bills that we passed, we'd be at 40,000. I see an ad out there saying 40,000 people are looking for work. You know, 30 some odd thousand of those are working. But I'm so proud of them because they're trying to improve their stay in life, and I want to do that. So it's very clear this election. You don't have three choices, you have two choices. You have a liberal mentality and you have a conservative mentality. The state of Maine is currently number one in the top 4 states for the percentage of its population that's working. We are in the top 4. The other thing we're top 4 of, with a liberal leading House and Senate, I am the 3rd highest rated governor for fiscal management in the 50 states. And yet the guys ahead of me have Republican houses, Republican senates. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor LePage. Congressman Michaud, your closing, please.
Thank you very much, Chris, in the chamber for having this debate. Now we can stop debating the debates and actually debate the issues. I was asked, why would I give up a safe seat for Congress to run for governor? The reason why I gave up that safe seat to run for governor is because I love this state of Maine. I was born and raised here in Maine. I plan on retiring here in the state of Maine. And as I go around the state, whether it's Aroostook County, York County, Piscataquis County, Washington County, people are fed up. They're tired of the divisiveness, the partisanship, and the failed policy of this administration. And when you look at the failed policy of this administration, we have more children living in poverty today, more homelessness. Look at the economic aspect. We're rated 47th in economic growth. Forbes, once again, we're 50th as far as on the list, the best place to do business. I'm running for governor not only to go back to the old ways, because that's not good enough. We have to forge a new path, a new future for the state of Maine. There's one person holding us back, and that is Governor LePage and his efforts. He has no plan. He never had a plan on how to move forward. And what really brought this to light was last year when I met with 5 of the European ambassadors to talk about the European trade deal and what it could mean for the state of Maine, and the fact that we have 3 ports here in the state of Maine. You look at shipping lanes. During that conversation about how I believe Maine is a great place, it was brought up about the governor here in Maine. We can do better, and we must do better. And that's why I rolled out over this past year my Maine Made plan that focuses on our strength as a state. As I mentioned earlier, 97% of the businesses in Maine are small business. If we're able to grow just at the national average over a 10-year time frame, that's 31,000 jobs. We do have the youngest farmers per capita in the country. There's no reason why Maine cannot be the food basket for New England. There's no reason why we can't be leading the world in renewable energy. We have the offshore wind potential, the solar, tidal power, with weatherization and conservation. We can do this, but we need a governor who believes in the state of Maine and will stop constantly attacking whether it's teachers, our workforce, and our business climate. We need a governor who has a pro-growth development plan, a governor who has a pro-growth competitive tax policy. That's what this is all about. It is about our future. So I ask each and every one of you to look at the candidates, and the governor's right. This is down to 2 individuals. And this race for governor, it could be a clear difference between the governor and myself where we're going to move this state forward. I worked with a lot of you over the years. We might not have always agreed, but I think we can agree on this, that I always had an open door policy, and even though we might have disagreed on issues, I still respected that disagreement. As I said earlier, I'm the only candidate on this stage that has a proven track record of being able to work across the aisle to get things done. So I ask for your vote this November 4th. Thank you very much.
Congressman, thank you.
Mike?
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our program.